Alright, tonight I'm going to tie for you a Lickety Split jig. This is an updated version of the Lickety Split that I developed quite a few years ago. It's been fishing very, very well. However, I have simplified the way that I tie it, and I wanted to show that to you. So, I tie it on a jig hook most of the time now. This is a XC400BL from Umpqua with a slotted gold tungsten bead. You can use whatever jig hook you prefer. This just happens to be one that I've found that I've really been liking it lately. So we're going to go ahead and start our thread. This is a size 14. This is as big as I actually fish this fly. I don't go any bigger than this. I'll tie it down to a size 18, but primarily I stick in the 14 to 16 range. This is 8/0 black uni thread. Take it back. We'll go ahead and tie in a tail. We're going to use some Coque de Leon. 5 or 6 fibers will suffice. We don't need it to be really bushy. Alright, so we'll just go ahead and prep those fibers. Now the tail length is going to be about the length, maybe a little bit shorter than the body of the fly, so maybe 2/3. Go ahead and just do a couple of pinch wraps, make sure it's secure. Looks pretty good, and then we're going to advance that thread up behind the bead. And I take the thread all the way behind the bead and let the stems kind of push the bead into place. Okay, next we're going to tie in a rib. For the rib, I use 4X tippet. And the rib isn't really like a color that stands out or anything like that. I use the tippet material pretty much to give some segmentation, and that's about it. So I usually will tie it right behind the bead. Keep it on top of the hook shank. Take the thread back. We're going to keep the body of this fly fairly sparse. And we're going to go just about to the end of the thread, but we don't want to go all the way or else it kind of can mess with that tail. And we're going to advance the thread back forward, right up behind the bead. Okay, from there we're going to take our rib and just segment the body of this fly nice and evenly, like so. Up behind the bead. Once you get behind the bead, there's actually going to be a split case that we're going to tie in that's going to cover those last couple of wraps, so if they end up a little bit closer than usual, no big deal. There we go. Okay, now we're going to take some black, let's see here, black holographic tinsel. Just cut off a strip, I don't know, 3 inches, 2-3 inches long. And we're going to take and match up the tips so they're both facing the same direction, and get them so that they're about the same length. If you need to trim them, you can once you have them pretty close. It doesn't have to be precise, but essentially we want it to look about like that, maybe a little closer together. And we're going to tie that onto the top of the hook. There we go. Just kind of pinch those together, tie them right behind the bead, work our thread back. As I'm working my thread back, see how the holographic tinsel stays open. That's important. So if you ever need to, you can actually just kind of keep it in that loop so I can put my finger between it if I need to and just kind of splay it open. That's going to be important because we're going to put our next material, some foam, in between that. Okay, and I'm going to go at least 1/3 of the way back on the body of this fly. There we go. And we'll advance the thread back up behind the bead. I'm going to take a piece of pink foam that I've actually cut down as thin as possible. So here's my piece of foam. I just take and cut a little sliver off from that guy, but it's got to be thick enough that it won't break when you tie it in, but thin enough that it's not going to be too bulky. You can, if you don't have pink foam, you can use floss. You can use anything that's the correct color, but I like foam because it kind of sponges back up through the wing case and gives kind of a cool look. This fly imitates an emerging mayfly. So as a mayfly nymph prepares to hatch, its back starts to split open and the mayfly adult pops out. So the foam gives the illusion that something is protruding out of the back of the fly. So that's kind of the idea behind the foam, but I wouldn't say that foam is a necessity. I think the colors are probably more important than the material. So I should say this is a black and pink version of the Lickety Split, which is what my go-to color scheme is for this. I also tied in brown and yellow. Those are my two most popular that I fish, but black and pink is far more productive for me than any other color variations. So I tie the foam in. I go back to the same point, same tie-in point as the holographic tinsel, stretch the foam forward, tie it off, and see how it's kind of sponges back up, kind of sticks up a little bit there. That's kind of the cool effect the foam gives you. And we'll just act like our scissors are a little bit of a razor, so it cuts off nice and clean behind the bead. Then I'm going to take this holographic black tinsel and we're going to pull it forward, one strand on each side of the pink foam, and tie it down. There we go. So as you can see there, that pink foam is going to be an attractor more than anything. Okay, after we make a couple of wraps on holographic tinsel, we're going to go ahead and trim that off, and this fly is almost done. It's pretty quick and easy. Not a lot to it. We don't tie on any legs or anything else anymore. Just a body and then that wing case. So I'm going to go ahead and whip finish. Keep your whip finish kind of sparse because we're actually going to glue the entire body of this fly. So one cool thing about this fly, we have a couple of different options for gluing it. You can use a UV material like Solary's Bone Dry, for example. But if you do, I would recommend going pretty sparse. The reason why we use the mono for the rib is we want it to look segmented. If you go thick with the Solary's like a Perdigon, then that disappears, and you could do that and just skip the mono rib altogether and it would probably fish fantastically. That'd be fine. But oftentimes what I'll do, I'll either go sparse with the UV material, or I'll just tie up a dozen and we'll go old school with some Sally Hansen's Hard as Nails and we'll just glue them all up. And I like this because it actually soaks into the thread material, into the foam, but it does leave that segmented rib. Makes for an extremely durable fly, and it does give a nice look to this fly. That's a Lickety Split jig. It makes it onto my rig more than any other pattern. It's deadly. It works great. So give it a shot. Thanks so much.